Welcome to the High Value Sales Show of Eversprint.com. I'm Malcolm Louie, the managing member of Eversprint, and today we're speaking with Don Bora, the co-founder and partner of 8-Bit Studios, a developer of mobile apps and websites. Welcome to the call, Don.
Thanks, Malcolm. Pleasure to be here.
Don, you grew your company's revenue from $1.6 million in 2014 to $4.1 million in 2017, a 150% increase. And in 2018, you hit around $5.5 million. Before we talk about how you grew your company so fast, can you briefly share what your company does beyond my quick intro and how your company differs from the competition?
Yeah, absolutely. So we make web and mobile apps. So that's the core of the business is the design, the user experience, the business strategy, and then the development and deployment of that. Where I think we shine a lot is on our brand strategy. We have a very, very talented design and user experience team. In fact, we have some of the leading talent in Chicago at our company. One of the things that I think makes us unique and stand out from our brothers and sisters in tech in Chicago, and I would say across the country, is the fact that the founders of the company, the talent that runs the executive team, we're all doers. So I'm a technologist. I've been coding in and around Chicago for about 30 years. And my co-founders, Steve and John, have also been doing their craft for between 15 and 20 years as well. So when it comes down to it, we can do the work. We know what it takes. We don't push our teams unreasonably. We have high empathy for everybody around us. So at the end of the day, we can be held accountable for that work as well.
All right, fantastic. Can you share with us how you grew your business from 1.6 million in 2014, and then 4 years later, you're hitting around 5.5 million? What were the three biggest drivers of that growth?
Yeah, it sounds really impressive when you say it that way. It's funny when you're on the roller coaster, you really can't see what's going on. You really can't see the height of the curves while you're taking them. I think some of the biggest drivers for us were strategy, the ecosystem in which Chicago is currently thriving, and the talent around us. So I think we were a bit uniquely positioned at the timing of when we started the company. That was when Chicago's startup scene, I guess it was like startup 2.0 scene, around 2008, 2009, really started to take off, and we got some world-class incubators that started around that time. Now I think we have 22, 23 world-class incubators, so houses of entrepreneurial cash and infrastructure. So about that time that's when that took off, and that really helped us focus what we wanted to do. Around that time, I had started a few companies already and a few consultant companies, and getting into your Fortune 500 and 100 companies was pretty difficult. You had to be on a list, you had to know certain people, you had to be pre-vetted. And when we saw kind of the ecosystem taking off around us, we realized is that if we set our vertical to be startups, we kind of circumvent all of that noise around working with larger companies. It's a risky vertical to go down because startups are risky. Sometimes they're putting up their own money. Sometimes they're barely funded. Sometimes they don't know the product roadmap very well of where they're going. And those are kind of some of the bumps that we ran across along the way, helping these entrepreneurs figure out what their product roadmap was going to be. And we got much, much better at that as we went along. The third thing that allowed us to really take off on the resourcing and staffing side of our company was the talent pool. So around about 2 years into having started 8-Bit Studios, we realized that there was kind of a dearth of developer talent. And we weren't the only ones feeling this. There were a lot of companies around town, and we were all kind of fighting for resourcing. Groupon was just getting big at the time, and Groupon was using some of the similar technologies that we were using. And it just became kind of a bloodbath out there a little bit, because we all knew that we're going after the same people and the same talent. It was around that time that I was approached by a person who would be a co-founder and friend of mine starting a bootcamp. And we started this bootcamp teaching people how to develop mobile apps. And we ended up hiring a lot of people out of that bootcamp and surrounding bootcamps that we became friendly with and mentoring at and helping set up. So between an existing pool of developer talent in Chicago, which is already pretty strong, we grew our own talent from boot camps and from boot camps that we frankly owned as well. So it's a very unique angle, and it's something to this day. Like when I look out at most of our staff, that most of the developers came from a boot camp. They've been with us for like 5 years now, and they're every bit as good as a CS major that would come out of school. And full disclosure, I do have a CS degree, so I'm very, very cognizant of the difference between somebody with a CS degree and somebody with a boot camp background.
Right. So, I have a computer science degree too, so I can kind of understand what you're talking about here. So the boot camp are for non-trained programmers?
That's correct. Yeah. So you've got people coming out of art school. You've got people coming out with English degrees. We had one guy that kind of floated around, went to the military, did project management at one of the big firms here in Chicago, and then made his way to the boot camp. So you name it, we've probably seen it come through the boot camp as far as their schooling went.
Wow. And these people, before they started the boot camp, they really never worked as a programmer, or were they self-taught to some degree before they joined the boot camp?
That's an interesting observation that I've just recently kind of intimated myself with, is that it's they were self-taught to a point, and then they got stuck and couldn't push themselves beyond, mostly because they didn't have any of the foundational work that a computer science degree gets you. So they were kind of starting from less than ground zero when they were trying to teach themselves how to code. And it's funny because when I look around at my crew and I try to get them to onboard their next technology, some of them have problems getting to that next technology bump in their career because they tried it once and they had a hard time. And that's when they went to the structure of boot camp. And I kind of realized this mid last year and went, oh, now what do I do? I don't have a boot camp anymore. How am I going to get, some of these developers to cross train? So it's actually a problem I'm working on right now.
So you're not doing the boot camp process anymore?
No. So it was about, and I think 2017, 2018 was when the bottom fell out a little bit. Dev Bootcamp shuttered. We shuttered. We were mobile makers. Hack Reactor sold. So there were it was a very tumultuous time. There were regulations were starting to come out of the States, and your student placement started to get very heavily scrutinized with the robustness of your curriculum. So it wasn't a problem for us because we had a lot of education professionals at our company. That being said, you're still at kind of the mercy of an adult ecosystem, and kind of like they're feeling like they're getting their money's worth. Where in college you don't have that. Everyone kind of is socialized to understand what that 4-year degree is like and what getting a job after that's going to be like. When you're running a boot camp, those students feel somewhat entitled is too strong of a word, but they feel like that this is the next natural step, and why the heck wouldn't I get a job? And they're out there competing with junior developers that have CS degrees as well. So it became a very high stakes, very high risk game. So we ended the adult version of the boot camp and we turned our sights on high school. And so presently, Mobile Makers turned into Uncharted Learning, and we write curriculum and teach teachers how to teach iOS development at high school level, which is so much fun.
Yeah, I bet. Now let me ask a little bit more about your boot camp, because this is kind of new to me. I kind of heard about it, but I'm my computer science era is way behind me now.
Yeah.
Now, how long do these boot camps last? And from how you explain it sounds like people are paying to be a member of the boot camp, or at least they were when you had it, the adult version.
Yeah. So boot camps can cost anywhere from, at the time it was, when we first started, we charged $8,000, and that was for 8 weeks. And then I think we went up to $12,000. And I think Dev Bootcamp hit around 16. And I think they were a 16-week program as well. So you're paying a lot of money to go through these boot camps. And one of the reasons that I wanted to push for high school was that I wanted to push the problem down the pipe a little bit. Get these kids exposed to technology, how it really is in the real world, and how much fun and creative it can be.
Right.
before they get into college and decide that they want to major in theater or English and then come out and have no career.
Right.
You know what? I'm gonna put a plug in right here for I'm on a advisory board for Code Platoon.
Okay.
And Code Platoon's mission, they are a coding boot camp for veterans, and I think it's a 16-week program, and I help mentor the teachers there, and I help with some student placement. But the whole idea is we get sponsorship from companies, and the veterans have to pay almost nothing to go through the program.
Cool.
It's a very rewarding experience to be a part of that organization.
Can you spell out the domain name again for Code Platoon?
Absolutely. It's code, CODE, platoon, PLATOON. And I think it's .org. Man, I really should know that off the top of my head.
Right. Well, they only have 3 variations to try, right?
Exactly.
.com, .org, .net. I'll figure it out, I think.
Yeah.
Now, because you were charging money for it, that's when you start getting on the radar screens of the various educational regulators. 1, because you're kind of competing against the institutions, and 2, because people are paying, and people want to be satisfied and get what they invest in it, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of fraud out there in the adult education space. There's a lot of companies that are charging money and delivering almost nothing. When Code Platoon's a nonprofit, and when Code Platoon decided to switch from a Ruby on Rails curriculum to a Python curriculum, our lead instructor went and took a Python bootcamp, and his stories that he told me just blew me away. It was kind of barely functional, and the minor prep work that our instructor did put him leaps and bounds ahead of the instructor at the time, and our instructor was heavily utilized during class from the other students to try to learn how to code. So there's a lot of, and I'm not saying that this other boot camp was fraudulent, but getting developers to quit their day job and come to teach code is hard.
Yep.
And you're not always going to get top tier talent. You're not always going to get somebody who even knows how to teach. You can have the best coder in the world, but if they don't know how to teach or talk to people that are learning how to code in a productive way, it's going to be very, very hard.
Yep. And I hear you. I remember in my college days trying to help my dorm mates who are taking the introductory computer science courses, and they just didn't have the luxury of playing around with computers for years.
Exactly.
Going to college, right? And then they're trying to figure out how to do looping and variables, and and then you start going into recursion, right? And then they're going, whoa.
Top 10 things you should never do.
Yeah, and it's difficult. Yeah, there's a lot of it takes a lot of skill to teach people how to program, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you stopped doing the boot camps, and now you pushed it down to the high school level, and I can see that's pretty innovative, finding staff. So how are you finding staff now?
Pretty much the same way I always done. So I'm a chatty guy. I like to talk. I like to socialize, and I've also been in Chicago for 30 years, the entirety of my career. So I'm pretty well networked throughout the city, and that maybe puts us at a little bit of an unfair advantage over some of our competitors. Because if I need to go out and find talent, I can ask 3 or 4, maybe 10 key people, and I'll start getting leads on people that are interested in us. And plus, we've been around long enough in the city, and Chicago's pretty thriving and small ecosystem, surprisingly small, that people know us. So when I knock on someone's door and say, 8-Bit Studios is hiring, that means something to a lot of developers right now, which is very, very flattering and heartwarming that we've gotten to that point.
Right. Now, if I'm working at Facebook or Google and then you come knocking on my door, what's their reaction going to be?
Yeah, I mean, probably exactly what I just did to you. I mean,
go and laugh.
It's a big, big difference between, first off, you've got the small fish in a big pond scenario, right?
Yep.
And you've got all the upward mobility at a company like Facebook or Google that we don't have. We're a small, flat organization, and our leadership and upward mobility opportunities come from once we create ourselves. We're very creative, but when you're at 45, 50 people, there's only so much room that you can grow into. We're seeing ourselves double in size the next few years. But that said, even when you do that, you're adding maybe another level of hierarchy. And it's, like I said, it's a pretty flat organization. So even the hierarchy that's in place right now is flattened as well, because we do our best to push empowerment down the food chain so that everybody kind of feels empowered to do what they need to do or they feel is right for a product.
Right. Okay. So you talked a little bit about your third driver, about talent around you, and I understand it's Bootcamp to begin with, to find the talent, which is pretty clever at the time, right? Because they're not competing for the same people. And then now you're leveraging your network. Now, how about the Chicago ecosystem? How's that evolved now? I know you said at the beginning you started your business right at the same time when startups are taking off and incubators are there to help you out. How is it today now in regards to the Chicago ecosystem for mobile app and website developers?
Yeah. So when we started 8-Bit, when 8-Bit was first going as kind of a nights and weekends fun project for me and my two co-founders, the Chicago startup scene really didn't exist. And primarily, well, one of the assumptions is because there wasn't a whole lot of ways to unlock the capital in Chicago. So Chicago's capital infrastructure was at the time pretty old conservative money. And I don't mean politically conservative. I mean economically conservative money. So it was very hard to get those people into a room, sell them, get them into conversations. And even when you did, Chicago's a money town. You got to show them where the revenues come from. You got to show them revenue streams, sources of income, balance sheets, projections. It's a very, very different game than on the West Coast. When the pattern started to shift to unlock institutional money from institutional investors around Chicago, some of the big money people started to get together and create tech incubators. And like I said, we started with 1871, and we've got about 22 of them around the city right now. That just gets better and better and better. One of the former co-founders of OpenTable created a social and economic impact incubator in town called Impact Engine. So you've got a lot of these. You've got a lot of specialized funding sources now where entrepreneurs can go in the medical field, in the mental health field, in social impact, diversity for diversity causes or mission-driven causes. So it's a really, really exciting time right now. In fact, I think I'm friends with about maybe 6 or 7 of our main competitors in Chicago, and we joke that there's just so much work it doesn't matter. We're all competing against the same projects, but we've all got way more work than we can handle most of the time.
Yeah, the pie is growing.
Yeah.
So when you take money from an incubator, how big a chunk of your equity do they take or get?
That really depends on the incubator, and I only know some of the older stories. So I probably shouldn't talk about that. Okay,
no worries. You don't need to talk about it. But maybe you can give me a rough range of what you think. And I won't hold you to it, but roughly speaking, what does an incubator puts $100,000 into your business? What do they get in return?
Well, so when an incubator puts that kind of money, if they put $100,000 into your business, there's going to be some kind of pre-money valuation that they're going to do against your company. So they're going to use that pre-money value and their investment to do the math and figure out what percentage of the company they own.
Okay.
They always want more percentage. That's their upside, right?
Right.
Because these investors what they're going to do is they're going to invest in an entire portfolio of companies.
Yep.
So for every 10 companies they invest in, one will pay off. And that one that pays off has to pay for the other 9.
Yes.
So they're trying to maximize their gain, and that's their business. That's their job. So they're trying to get, sometimes I think a normal investment round would probably be around 8 or 10%, but some of these people, they're probably going for like 20, 25%, which is a huge chunk in any company. Because then that really restricts your ability as an owner and a founder to bring on more investors.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. So typically incubators, again, I'm not super familiar with how incubators work.
Okay.
They their investment size is usually a 6-digit size, or can it really be like start talking about multi-million and kind of entering into the VC space?
Not really VC space. So let's talk about 1871 because that's the one I know the best. So 1871 is here in Chicago, and they've got roughly, I think like 50 to 60,000 square feet over 2 floors of one of the largest buildings in the world that happens to be here in Chicago, the Merchandise Mart. And they provide desk space, meeting space, networking telephone, printers if you need them, all the infrastructure that you need to operate a company. And you basically rent space from them, and it's cheap space. It's co-working type space. But 1871 is run as kind of like this a company / community. So there's constantly events going on, networking events, panels, kickoff events when companies move out, when companies move in. One of our we've had several startups that have started in 1871. And shoot, I just found out that there's a company that's been at 1871, and they're still there pretty much when they started 1871, and they're still a resident business in 1871, which is pretty rare. Normally you get, a couple of years under your belt, you get some revenue and you move out and you get an office space. So an incubator is really trying to maximize the amount of infrastructure that they can lease to you cheaply so that you can stay and then be part of like an internal brain trust.
Okay.
So all these startups are kind of talking to each other and find out who's doing what and where can I hire talent. I need a designer, I need a developer, that kind of thing. Okay.
So how does 1871 at the end of the day pay their bills? I know they're charging some below market rates to get people to be there. Is part of the deal that they get a cut of some equity stake as well, or first opportunity to invest, that sort of arrangement?
I'm really not certain about their entire revenue model, but I know they make money off of their rent when they rent to these companies. There's also a lot of companies that sit inside of there that are vendors of the startups. So you've got there's investment companies, there's banks that sit inside of there for purposes of lending
right.
and whatnot. So there's a lot of commercial real estate type business going on that drives the funding
right.
for 1871.
Right, I can see that. You have a marketplace of startups, and you have vendors around them that can help them. So yeah, I can see how they can generate some revenue from that. Okay, and number one, your biggest strategy, focusing on startups. Now, is that something you're still doing today, focusing on startups?
Well, we realized that once you get to a certain size, it's pretty risky to do. So when we got to 30 people full-time on a payroll with benefits, then we realized this is not sustainable. And you have to keep that pipeline pretty stacked. And it's a constant hustle when all the products that you're building are costing between $50,000 and $100,000. It's hard to run an entire company on that. So we kind of realized that we needed to go out there and fish for some bigger whales. Our strategy was to go out and find three whales that could A, sustain us, and B, kind of meet our criteria for clients that we like to work with. And one of our main criteria is they've got to love what they do. And finding that in a larger enterprise client is hard. So it took us a while to find our enterprise clients, but we finally did. And they come and go as well, but it takes longer for them to come and go, and you can plan a little better. So right now, we're out there kind of figuring out a strategy for the next round of bigger companies that we're going to try to engage with.
So when you say that you went for the whales, how big a whale are you talking about? Are you talking about Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000? Fortune 500. Actually, that's getting pretty big.
Yeah, it is pretty big, and we don't tend to differentiate on that. So we're not. Look, I would love to work with BMW or Boeing. Those are my dream clients.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we're really not looking at that size differentiation. We're mostly looking at are they a business? Do they have a sustainable business model themselves? Are they pulling in enough cash to be able to want to do product development over many years? And do they have a really good idea of a product roadmap to sustain us for a while?
Right.
So that's kind of like the nickel and diming of the criteria. Let's put some stakes in the ground and see if this is something that we can work for a couple of years with you guys and really become partners.
Sure.
And so we've successfully done that with Underwriters Laboratories, a bigger company. We've successfully done that with Echo Logistics that I mentioned before. They're in Chicago. We've done that with. And there's a few others as well. And the excitement level there is we found staff inside the company that's really loving what they do, and they're really excited about it. We found long product roadmaps that get our team jazzed, and we're excited to work on this stuff. And that recipe right there is really all you need to lower turnover and keep excitement high and keep everyone wanting to come in the morning. Right.
Now, do you have a minimum, just to help you filter it down, right? There are tons of businesses out there. Do you have a minimum revenue requirement? The companies that are, below this level generally aren't going to have the roadmap, the cash flow, the excitement.
Well, and that's where it gets dicey, because we kind of don't want to do that. Even last year, we worked with a startup. The startup is called Run Better, and their product is to help marathon runners use treadmills to train for marathons. And so they got all this GPX data. So GPX is latitude and longitude and elevation. They've got all this data that they've collected from marathons around the world, and they needed some way to translate that to a treadmill to aid a marathon runner to train for, let's say, Boston when they lived in Chicago, which is a very flat city. So they didn't have a lot of cash. It's 3 founders that came to us, and that hit a lot of buttons for us. We're just like, it's health and wellness, it's fitness. We have runners in the company that are excited about this. That gives us an opportunity to do something really neat and creative in a space, because they don't really have a brand presence yet. So we can really kind of open up the floodgates on creativity from the tech side and the design side. And if we put an artificial cap on the amount of revenue a company has to have, we wouldn't have worked with them. Right. If we had a minimum start, we wouldn't have worked with them.
Sure.
So we try to be really careful about that, because we don't want to miss out on opportunities that are going to get us really excited.
Yeah. But in this particular case, how can you sound like they're a brand new company, a brand new product, great idea.
Yep.
But what about the cash flow situation, cash flow side of things? How do you assess that they have literally the cash or the cash flow to, pay for your team?
Yeah. I get what you're saying. So we're not cheap. We're not, and the people that can't afford us, we tend to see that right away.
Okay.
We see the sticker shock, we hear it. And look, I'll be honest, often there have been times in the past when our prices weren't high enough to give those people pause. But at the same time, we kind of realized that they'd opened up their coffers to us and said, here's how much money we have. We'd like to spend it all with you. And we were like, how are you going to tell anybody about this? How are you going to market it? And those are companies that we've kind of not turned away, but basically helped them figure out other ways to get their product built for less money. And come back to us when things are going well and you're looking down the road a little bit. The last thing we want to do is take everyone's money, and then they don't have a way to talk about it. They don't have a way to market it. And then they're on the hook for all this money, and they've got an app that they can't sell.
Yep. And then that no longer hits the criteria of a long-term product roadmap.
Exactly.
So, okay. Now, I know you mentioned earlier in the conversation, you're looking to double the size of your company in a few years, but how about looking a little bit closer, near term? What are your 2019 plans and targets? You ended 2018 around 5.5 million. What's your sales target for 2019, and how are you going to get there?
Well, I think our sales target for 2019 is going to be right around the 7 mark. Okay. We've got some brand new talent on our sales team. We've introduced an accounts team. So our sales team grew from last year. We had 2 people on the team and went down to 1. We're back up to 2, but on the account side that's managing existing accounts and looking for opportunities there that we were leaving on the table before, we've now got 6 people on that team. And we've also got somebody that we put in charge of our internal products that we've created or we own or we're partnered with, that we've never really put the weight of our company behind. And so we've dedicated a full-time resource to that as well. So between the person responsible for growing our internal product revenues, the people that are responsible for looking for growth opportunities with existing companies, and then our staff that's going out and finding new opportunities and responding to people coming to us. Those are kind of like boots on the ground way that we're looking to hit quote unquote the numbers. But that's not really all we're trying to do. We're not just trying to hit the numbers. There's, bigger goals we have in place. There's more product that we want to develop. There's more creative companies that we want to work with. We've got, companies in mind that we're like, how do we talk to these people without just showing up on their door and pushing an elevator button?
Yeah. So you're looking to grow your business about 1.5 million extra in addition over the 5.5 million last year. And you mentioned three sources, right? Your internal products, doing more business with your existing clients, and finding new clients to do new business. Where do you see that 1.5 million of additional revenue coming from across those three areas?
I think primarily it's going to come from the accounts and sales teams. We're putting together a pretty robust roadmap and strategy for the internal products, but I'm not quite sure what that's going to do for us yet. We're already almost halfway through Q1, and we've kind of got to take a step back a little bit and assess. These products are ready to go. It's all a matter of like the marketing, and the marketing strategy is really kind of what for me is difficult to think about putting together.
Yep.
And that's what these people are good at. So my pessimism might step on their enthusiasm a little bit, and that's the last thing I want to do. So I'm just, in my mind, I've got like where I think the money's going to come from, and if I'm wrong, I'll be happy.
Sure. Okay. And what do you see as your biggest marketing and sales challenges across these three revenue sources? I know for the internal product line, I guess the biggest challenge is coming up with your marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. But what other big challenges do you have on the marketing and sales front?
Yeah, I think the we've never really had much success in outbound sales. Outbound sales is kind of a pain. You have to go to a company and you have to convince them to work with you. You have to convince them that they need you. You have to convince them that they need something that they didn't think they needed an hour ago. And it's always twisted my brain a little bit. And it's always felt a little weird to try to convince somebody. That's why inbound works so well. People that come to you with a need, now all you have to do is say, well, of course we can do this for you. It's just a matter of how and when. So I think for us, I think that one of the hurdles is going to be figuring out how we get ourselves into conversations that may not exist or may not know that are coming. So
right.
That's one of our biggest hurdles, I think.
Okay. What have you tried in the past for your outbound sales? And
oh man, man, what have we tried? Everything but t-shirt cannons. I feel like we hired clients that have owed us money. We put them on the payroll and said, go and work it off. Every lead you get, we'll give you a certain amount of credit for, and you'll pay off your debt that way. We hired somebody who was a CEO of a very prominent kind of like a tech networking company, and that was amazing. But it yielded very little.
What was he supposed to do?
So she was basically connecting us to all the people she knew, and she's got an insane network, and I can't talk about her much because I didn't have her permission to do this. So,
okay.
She's got an insane network, and it was, basically whenever she saw a need, she'd throw us in front of them.
Right.
And nothing ever panned out of that. And it wasn't her fault. It's just a hard thing to do. We put on a podcast.
Right.
called Bites Over Bagels, where we interviewed, oh man, everybody from like the founders of Spot Hero to the CTO of the city of Chicago. It was amazing. We did get a few leads from that. We weren't doing it primarily for lead generation. We were doing it primarily to scratch a creative itch that a few people inside the company had. But we realized the opportunity was there. We co-hosted a WGN podcast on technology. I mean, the amount of stuff we've done is kind of nuts. And it feels like very out of the box thinking.
Yep.
The only thing we haven't done is we haven't hired anybody with a Rolodex. We haven't said, come bring your Rolodex and go hunt. We haven't done that because everybody that we've talked to that fits that mold doesn't doesn't quite, I don't know, it doesn't quite feel like the right relationship to us. Plus which, in order to sell a company like us to clients, you need to know a lot about technology and field a lot of questions, especially when you're doing with mobile, because mobile touches so many different platforms and audiences. So it gets a little dicey, and we're very cognizant of that.
Right. Definitely. Okay. Understood. But if you did find the right person or the right way of doing your outbound marketing and generating leads, what impact do you see? Can you imagine that this can give you for your business? I mean, would you be blowing well past your $7 million mark?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. I mean, look, the delta between 5.6 and 7, or 5.5 rather, and 7 is small compared to, to the years past. I think 7 is a bit of a conservative leap when you're talking about growth. So it's also a kind of like a realistic attainment as well. And that's one of the things I hit. I'm kind of a realist when I look at this stuff. So I'm looking at historical data, and I'm saying, okay, well, we've got some new talent on the team, and they're not going to go as fast in a short amount of time. So we got to give these people time to ramp up. But yeah.
Okay. So are any other particular marketing and sales challenges on your mind beyond the roadmap for your internal product, and 2, maybe figuring out how to do some outbound marketing and outbound sales?
Well, I think the challenge is that we pay a lot of attention to our people, what they like working on, how they like working, their lifestyle and the work-life balance. We pay a lot of attention to that, and we think we get a lot of things right. So part of what we get right is choosing clients and products to work on that energize our people. So our challenge is not just to get in front of a big company, it's to get in front of a big company that align with the values of our people. And we've sampled our people to figure out what those companies are, what's the profile, and who some of them are by name. And so now the challenge is, all right, now we got the names. That's the target. You're not just, taking a shotgun out into a Fortune 500 phone book and seeing what you hit. That was a terrible metaphor, by the way, man. That was really, really bad. Let's get some mileage out of that later. You're really going it's a very surgical strike strategy. You're going after a certain company because you really, really believe in what they're doing. And that is where it gets really hard.
Yeah. I think it sounds like you might be 50% of the way there if you already know which companies you'd be keen to work with. Now it's just a matter of finding the right people within those companies. That's right. Just
a matter of finding the right people.
Yeah. Which, of course, it always sounds easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
So, 3 last questions for you. First one, in Chicago, perhaps on a holiday when traffic is super light and people can speed along on the freeways, what would be your billboard message? And typically people only have 6 seconds to read and digest a billboard. So what is your 6-second billboard message?
8-bit studios. Want to play?
8-bit studios want to play. Okay.
I just came up with that, by the way. So
no, it's good.
So if my brand team is listening, we'll talk on Monday.
And the last 2 questions: who are your ideal clients, and what's the best way for them to reach your team?
Our ideal clients are startups and I would say mid-level enterprise companies, mid-size enterprise companies. When you're a mid-size enterprise company, when you have kind of an entrenched team that's got some freedom to work and needs an entrepreneurial mindset, we've got your back on that. We have the technical prowess and expertise to help you navigate the sticky waters of your own IT and tech departments. And we're very good at that. We talk tech teams off the ledge a lot, and we work very well with internal teams. So those are when we have internal stakeholders that understand technology and they've got freedom to move a little bit, that's when we do our best work with enterprise companies. If you're a startup, love what you do. Love what you do. Be passionate about it. We're less concerned with your exit strategy. We're less concerned with how many companies you sold or what market share you can get. We're less concerned with that, and we're more concerned with you love what you do, because we're gonna be right there with you. It's a road trip we take together, and we've got to have a good time on this road trip. It's a 3-day journey across country, and we're gonna piss each other off. And let's make sure that we're both in this for the right reasons.
Right. And you mentioned 3-day journey across the country. Does that also reflect how fast you want to move? Because that's you're going pretty fast.
No. It's commensurate to a road trip. It takes about 5 days to go across country. So,
and you have to do it in 3.
I just whipped that off the top of my head.
Sure. So. No trouble. And what's the best way for them to contact you and your team?
Sure. You can visit 8bitstudios.com. You can send an email to welcome to awesome@8bitstudios.com or info@8bitstudios.com. You can find us on Twitter. We're 8bitstudios on Twitter and on Facebook. And you can look us up on LinkedIn at 8bitstudios as well.
All right. Fantastic. One last question for you. 8-bit is pretty old technology nowadays. So,
so
we're in the 64-bit world now.
Sure. Yep. And someday we'll be in the 128-bit world. My business partner, when he came up with the name, one of his original thoughts about this was, and I'm not sure I agree with him, and we have a lot of philosophical arguments around this, but in his opinion, gameplay hit its zenith with 8-bit technology. Everything else was just sound and graphics.
I can see that. Yeah. Yeah, I can see his perspective from that point. Yeah, sound and graphics have really been driving things, right? People want more realistic sounds, more impressive graphics. Right.
Yeah, and you can argue that things like Portal that are highly imaginative, we owe that to 64-bit technology. But at the same time, you can kind of see that working in 8-bit. It just might not be as engaging or as immersive.
Yeah. And then, not to get too geeky here, but when you imagine or think back about what people did in the 8-bit world, like the adventure game, if you remember.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
Yeah. I mean, it was written in BASIC, right? So, I mean,
was it really?
I think so.
Idea. Wow.
I think I recall looking at the source code for that. It's in BASIC.
You think about you think back to like 8-bit technology. I believe Dragon Slayer still falls in the 8-bit category, and that used a laser disc to deliver its content. So, very, very simplistic programming, very simplistic joystick control logic. But at the same time, they were moving a laser around a laser disc and delivering pretty high fidelity content. And that was pretty lo-fi as well.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing how you accelerate your company's high value sales, Don.
No, it's my pleasure, Malcolm. Thanks so much for having me.
We've been speaking with Don Bora, the co-founder and partner of 8-Bit Studios, about his company's rapid growth. For interviews with other fast-growing, high-value sales companies, or to learn how we can accelerate your firm's high-value sales through automation, visit eversprint.com.